Great. Welcome, everybody. The one thing we're talking about tonight is we've talked about race day, but I wanted to put it into more specifics and talk really about how do you run the Santa Monica Classic specifically. But it is a mile and a quarter from the starting line to the pier. So if you park near the starting area, you got a long way to get walking back to your car. You could park on the pier and pay, whatever it is, 12, 15 bucks for the pier, and you'll be right there for the finish. But then you got to walk a mile and a quarter, which could be a good little warm up, but a mile and a quarter to the starting line, which you could do just go right up the strand there from the pier, right up the strand, you'll see the starting line. But there is free parking where you don't have to pay for the beach parking on 5th and 6th Street at Ocean Park. Now, again, you're going to be a couple blocks up from the starting line. There is a school there, and if you park in where it says teachers only, on the weekend they have free parking. It's not just teachers only, it is on the weekend free parking for anybody. I used to live on that street. I used to park there. I never got a ticket. Nobody gets a ticket in the evenings or on the weekends. There is also a great farmers market on the corner of Ocean Park and Main Street, right up from the starting line. So if you're going, put your car there on 5th and 6th Street for free, go up to Main Street, and you need cash or there is an ATM, but you can get like some great lunch and stuff to take home right there near the starting line. The start, 5K start, you can, by the way, pick up your bib number first thing in the morning. I'm not sure if there's an added fee, but I do know day of bib pickup is absolutely chaotic. There are a million people wanting their bib numbers for the Santa Monica Classic. It is far better to go to the Big Five the day before and pick up your bib number. I think I have the bib, oh, here it is. Bib pickup from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday, the day before, at the Big Five on 3121 Wilshire Boulevard. Just remember, like 30th block of Wilshire Boulevard, toward the end of Santa Monica, away from the beach, at the Big Five there on Wilshire between 11 and 4. Or race day, it's between 6:30 and 8, but it is chaotic. Now, the 5K starts at 8, the 10K at 8:30. So remember, 5K 8, 10K 8:30. We will meet on the big grassy hill, and I will show you a picture of that big grassy hill from like 40 years ago coming up. I think you might find this story interesting. So we will meet on the big grassy hill that is overlooking the starting line. You cannot miss it. If you're facing the starting line in the corral, it's up toward your left, below the two twin towers to your left. Anyway, I actually happen to live in the North Tower, so I know this community very well. It's where my dog went to the bathroom. At any rate, think through nutrition. Anyway, think nutrition. This Saturday morning is a great time to just test out nutrition. What are you going to eat for breakfast? What are you going to eat right before we do our run? Do you need 3 hours to digest before our Saturday morning run? So this Saturday, we already talked about nutrition, lots of carbs. See how you do with breakfast Saturday morning, maybe a bar before the run, whatever it is that you need to get you through that. Again, we talked about ritual. I'm just going through race day stuff really quick so you just plant it in your mind. We'll do this again for the half marathon, but with a real deep dive by mile to mile of the half marathon, the Rose Bowl half. And then again, as we get closer to the LA Marathon, that's going to be a really big, deep dive, mile by mile, because it's 26 of them, miles, that is. Pick a ritual. We discussed this last time. Maybe it's before the start of the race, you kiss a religious pendant. Maybe it's you have some kind of ritual. I mentioned that pro basketball player bounces the basketball 3 times for each one of his 3 kids. I have my own little ritual, kind of talking to myself. But pick a ritual that you can do. I mentioned Michael Phelps. His ritual is listening to music with the big headsets and the hood over his head, so he's just looking down and he sees nothing to his left or right. That's his ritual before the big swim, before the Olympic event. Find a ritual that you can think of one in the next couple days before the Santa Monica Classic. Elevation changes we are going to talk about in a minute. And I have kind of a breakdown of all of that you can take a look at. Where do you run mile by mile? This is obviously going to be a longer deep dive for the half and the full, but just give you a flavor of what you can start to see when you break it down mile by mile. For longer races, right now for a 5K, 10K, unless you're one of our slower walker groups, you're really not going to go over 90 minutes. So you really don't have to worry about glycogen. What you do have to worry about is fatigue. So if you go out too fast, which we're going to show, you're going to like run into a lot of fatigue and your heart rate is going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And you may get to a point, maybe not where you're running out of glycogen at all, but you may get to a point where you're reaching your HR max, meaning your maximum heart rate. You have a governor that your heart rate will not go above. And when you hit close to that HR max, you start feeling your chest pounding, and you may even feel it in your neck, and your body, your legs start getting heavier and heavier, filled with waste product acids, where your legs are feeling heavier. And essentially your body is going to slow you down because you've just been going harder and harder and harder and harder and harder for too long a period of time. But glycogen consumption will not be an issue for a 5 and 10K unless you're one of our slower walkers beyond 90 minutes, an hour and a half. Temperature and weather, we don't know what the heat temperature is going to be like. The hotter it is, the higher your heart rate will be from the moment you start. This is a factor. We'll discuss that as we get closer to the race, Santa Monica Classic. We'll certainly know what the Santa Monica Classic is going to be like on our chat the Thursday before the race. That'll be the week that we discuss the half marathon, and I'll discuss temperature for the Santa Monica Classic. Create 3 goals. We discussed this very, very briefly last time, but your pie in the sky goal, I will win my age group. Your B goals, such as maybe having a PR, and your down to earth goal, maybe such as, I will finish this. What the hell, screw it. I'll take pictures along the way at the finish. I'm going to finish. That's your C goal, your down to earth goal. But create 3 goals. Pie in the sky, I will win this race, my age group, and I will have a PR as your middle goal. And then I'm just going to finish is you pick before your race now 3 goals that you can get excited by. Even if you don't win your age group, even if you don't have a PR, damn it, I finished and I got to take some cool pictures with friends smiling at the finish line. What a great day. You still fulfilled a goal. The other thing is we didn't discuss is even if you don't fulfill your goals, how are you going to celebrate once you cross the finish line? Have a plan. What are you going to do? Yes, you will finish on, and I'll show you the map in 1 second. You will finish on Ocean Avenue, not far from the Santa Monica Pier. The Santa Monica Pier is you'll walk onto the pier, which is where the finish line, the finish area is, right? Not a lot of security. You easily be able to walk right onto the pier, and you can get your race t-shirt. If you go to the LA Roadrunner awning, you will be able to pick up your Roadrunner t-shirt if you're a member of the Roadrunners. the pro membership, as I mentioned. Hang out at the Roadrunner awning and say hi. Mile one, if you imagine the entire coast from the totem pole all the way to the starting line of this race, is a slight unseen downhill, which you know from Ocean Avenue. Ocean Avenue from north to south is a slight unseen downhill, right? So when we start, we're going headed south. We're headed away from the pier for about 0.2 of a mile or so. So you have a slight downhill right from the beginning. But you don't want to start out your 10K, this is a 10K, or even the 5K. They both start in the same exact direction. The 5K starts first at 8 o'clock, 10K at 8:30, right? So I'm giving this a weight factor pretty similar to your average overall pace. It's going to be about a 9:53, but then things start to slow down. It drops, you're going straight east, about 2 blocks over to Main Street. And then Main Street, you take a left turn on Main Street, and now you're going north. You're going that slight uphill north up Main Street. And I'll show you some history on Main Street in a minute. But now things are slowing down. You're going to feel heavy. So you're going south, left turn, flat, left turn again. Now you're going north. And now it's what was a little downhill is now a little unseen uphill. And the weight is going to increase for that first mile to that second mile. Now you're at about 9:53 pace. 9:59 pace, almost 10-minute per mile pace. And then you're going to hold on to that. It's still going that unseen uphill past the municipal building. You take a left turn on, what is it, Broadway, and you're headed right toward the Santa Monica Pier. And before you slam into the Santa Monica Pier, you take a right turn. And again, that slight uphill, you're headed north up Ocean Avenue. We all know Ocean Avenue, but we will be this time in the middle of the street headed up Ocean Avenue. Now, here again, you're going to go past the starting line, you're going to go past the finish line. 5Kers are going to go a little bit past the finish line, maybe 1/10, 2/10 of a mile. You U-turn and then you got a downhill back to the finish. The 10Kers are still on that uphill all the way to San Vicente, right? It's about a mile. That finish line is about where the LA Marathon finish line was over about 1.5 years ago in March. Same area for the finish line, right? You take a right turn up San Vicente, and suddenly, with this actually, the weight here should be even more than it is. It should be more like a 102, maybe even, there you go, maybe even a 1.1. See, the weight is changing the pace. Suddenly, your pace is now at 10:43. Now you're almost at 6.2 miles. So it's a little off still. Our weight factor needs to end up at 6.2. It's now 6.1 something. Anyway, but suddenly you're going up San Vicente for about not quite a mile, about 3/4 of a mile. So you're really slowing down, struggling to get up that hill. Again, it's not about glycogen, it's about heart rate. You don't want to get your heart rate too high, right? Or you hit HR max. But then suddenly, from that 10:43, look at the change. You do a U-turn at 11th Street. Suddenly, you're going what was uphill, a pretty solid uphill up San Vicente, is now the opposite. And now look at that pace. Instead of a 9:44 at the first mile, you're now down to 8:17. And your average pace is the same, about 9:39. I did change the weight, so it changed the average pace a little bit. But still a 9:39 average. But look at that 8:17 coming down San Vicente to the finish line. and then all the way down Ocean Avenue. From San Vicente to the finish line is about a mile, almost a mile. But even before that, you got about a 3/4 of a mile. So some of this is actually a little uphill and some downhill. But at any rate, that's your race for the Santa Monica Classic. To give you an example, dramatic changes in how to deal with hills. This is the time to get an understanding of where your ranges are. What can you do with each of your groups and individual groups? Here, the starting line of your race in the 1960s would have looked like this, right there, right over here, where, I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think, can you nod, somebody? Can you see my cursor? Right where this, yeah, this building is here. You see this little red building? Right, this bigger building, right there, that street is the starting line in 1960. And this whole pool, this parking lot is where you could pay to park today. That parking lot is still there. This is just a little piece of history. All these little buildings around this area here are gone. This area in the late 60s was all boarded up. It was kind of a land grab. They wanted to build like 20 of the giant 17-story towers that I am now sitting in, one of them. And they wanted these big 17-story towers that you will see from your starting line. You will be below them. They wanted to build like 20 of them up the coast and up Main Street. So our Santa Monica would have looked more like kind of like Miami Beach today with all the giant hotels and all of that, except for the fact they boarded up. This was Pacific Ocean Pier. Pacific Ocean Pier were two major piers that you're looking at now, this old picture. None of this is here today. You can't even tell any of this was here today, years and years ago, decades ago, because it's all gone. But all this area was boarded up because they wanted to put in these giant buildings, and they paid everybody who lived in these little buildings here about $500, and they claimed that all of this area was taken over by public domain and to build these giant buildings by private developers. And these two towers failed. So the developers walked away from it, and all these boarded up buildings that were earmarked to be torn down, and all these boarded up buildings that were now empty, were now being surrounded by homeless and drug dealers and hookers and pimps. And this wonderful pier where people used to bring their children, no one wanted to bring their children in this neighborhood anymore. This is a history of your starting line at the Santa Monica Classic. And so this pier failed. It, in its day, what you're looking at was made more money than Disneyland when it started. This big building right here that you're seeing next to the red roof was where in the early 60s, the Lawrence Welk Show, if you know that, was filmed and it aired in primetime television. It is in the 50s where the famous comedian Lenny Bruce was arrested for talking dirty late at night. If you know Lenny Bruce, famous comedian in the 50s, I think he died in 1955. Famous movie Lenny, talked about him. That's where he performed. And it was where the Beach Boys did their first concert ever in their lifetime. And in the 60s was also, it became like a standard for the psychedelic music of the time, that nightclub right there. became kind of a famous place, all gone. All of this neighborhood is gone. It became, after the late 60s, known as Dogtown. It became one of the worst neighborhoods, from thriving to one of the worst neighborhoods in Los Angeles, because everything was boarded up and homeless and drug dealers and you name it. That's who was there. You did not want to hang out in this neighborhood. The gangs were rampant. This was the front of Pacific Ocean Pier. That's what it looked like. Right next to the parking lot, that would have been there. And these little houses to the left were those little tiny little houses. This is now a street where you see these streetlights. Here's a big example of Pacific Ocean Pier in its heyday. There was a water ride, there was a roller coaster, you name it, there was a tram ride. It was an unbelievable place. Many of the Disneyland rides of the day were on this pier. In fact, Walt Disney himself was thinking about going in on this pier and not doing Disneyland. Obviously, that did not happen. So we are done with the Santa Monica Classic discussion. And do not look at where you are today and ask why. I said this last week. Look to the future and all the possibilities that lie therein and say, why not? I hope you enjoyed our little deep dive into the Santa Monica Classic and some of the history of that neighborhood where you are running. I should tell you one other thing, and that's that Casa del Mar, where our water table is every week, that little hill there, there were a bunch of surfers that after that Pacific Ocean Pier died, after this was burned to the ground, and the fire department showed up like an hour and a half late, and it was already a shambles, and there was an insurance claim, and it was all gone. Surfers surfed what was left, the pylons of the pier, and you can still see pictures of it in different places. There's a wonderful documentary. I highly recommend it before your Santa Monica Classic, called Dogtown and Z-Boys. And the surfers were named Zephyr Team. And they started doing skateboarding down that hill next to Casa del Mar. And the bottom of that hill is where our water table has been several weeks. These guys, the Zephyr Team, became the first skateboarders ever to start skateboarding swimming pools and doing these crazy surfer moves. And that was that hill right next to where our water table has been and will be, right next to Casa del Mar there, right beyond the pier, the Santa Monica Pier. So that's a famous little hill. And on Main Street, if you're doing the Santa Monica Classic, you will run by a coffee shop that says on the right side of the street, it will say Dogtown Coffee Shop. And that was the surfboard shop where Team Zephyr met. So a lot of little history for that little area where we run and where you will be running your Santa Monica Classic. Little tidbits that I personally love. I hope you find of some amusement. And with that, I say thank you, and we'll see you all at the finish line